Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old-timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs.
Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. Today we're going to talk about licorice, which is a fascinating herb, okay? You're probably just familiar, and unless you're really into herbs, with licorice as a flavoring for candies. It actually began as a medicinal herb. The use of putting licorice in candies sort of came from cough drops, which were licorice based, and oftentimes horehound based. Horehound is an extremely bitter herb, whereas licorice actually has a natural sweetness to it. It really is, it's interesting because some people interpret the flavor of licorice as bitter. It has to do with your brain and your taste buds. Two different people will eat licorice and get two different flavors out of it. For most people, licorice is actually sweeter than sugar. Really interesting plant, but it has amazing medicinal values. We will get into that. It's antiviral, it's good for the lungs, it's good. It actually strengthens the kidneys. We'll get into some warnings about licorice as well because it can cause high blood pressure in certain people. Really interesting history, really interesting herb, and one that I think is one of the indispensable herbs. It's one that I would not be without. But before we get into licorice, we'll get into this week's recipe. And, maybe as I discuss licorice, I'll give you a little licorice candy recipe too. But, it is still winter. I've got a nice little cold snap going right now after it was really warm this past week, and it's going to warm up again next week. I mean, I'm just like itching. I'm like champing at the bit to get out there and plant the garden. But I know in the mountains of North Carolina, my last average frost date is in May. So I gotta keep talking myself in off the ledge on that one. I mean, it's really even too early for me to get tomatoes and peppers and such going inside. I probably ought to wait till maybe I could go ahead and do that just to satisfy my gardening needs. But no, if I'm so they don't get luggy and everything, I probably ought to wait until April 1 because we're talking like May 15 around here. We can still get a frost. I could go ahead, certainly, start sprouting some cabbage. Well, as soon as the ground is thawed enough to work, I can get spinach and peas out there and a few other things. But, maybe I could start planting some collards for an early crop, sprouting them indoors, thinking about moving them out. Cauliflower is a cool weather plant, but it likes a lot of sun. So really the only thing that would be preventing me from putting out the cauliflower just yet, the ground actually may be thawed, but it's going to freeze again. Don't fool myself on that. The sun angle. I need the sun angle to change, and then I could get some cauliflower plants out there. Radishes definitely. Mustard greens. Probably my favorite of all greens. Turnips be good to go. These cool season greens that you can get in early. They bolt in the summer, so you want your crop in the spring and in the fall. And if you're in a slightly warmer environment than I am, you can probably keep turnips and collards and such going all winter. I would have to do some row covers. And, well, I mean, when row covers get covered with snow, they're not letting any light in. So it's really, where I live, more seasonal. Although there is a perennial collard. I really want to look into this. They're called tree collards. I'm not sure if they're perennial or biennial, meaning that they set seed in the second year. Um, Really old plant. You can pick leaves off of it year round, and it just kind of keeps growing. Now you can actually do that with regular collards. If you just keep harvesting the bottom leaves, they'll keep growing up. But where I live, it's going to freeze hard, and that's going to be an issue. But maybe where you live, you can have some greens going all year. I think it would definitely be worth, for me, looking into maybe doing some cold frames, hot boxes, maybe even a Mike Oehler. And Mike Oehler, I probably have not mentioned him before. Mike Oehler wrote the book, The $50 Underground House. I think it was it. The $50 and Up Underground House. I mean, the dude literally back in like the early 70s figured out a great design to do a partially subterranean house. I mean, it's not an underground house. You're not living in a basement or a cave. It's actually like three walls would be essentially banked under soil, and then the whole front of it's open to sunlight. So it's really an earth insulated home. And he called it the $50 house because he got everything he needed, like from junkyards and just scrap stuff, and he built a house for $50. So he had to buy some like used windows or and a door or something. That was the only reason it cost that much. He improved the design over the years. He passed away a few years ago. Excellent book. I mean, really good book. If you're interested in building your own home, I mean, yeah, if you've got a good slope, it's not suitable for flat land because if you're underground and you have a flood, you're in trouble. So you want to be on a slope that's going to shed rainwater. You're not going to have the standing water problem. The slope has to be oriented properly. Like you would not want a house like this where I live. Actually, I'm on a northwest slope, so I really should have checked that out before I bought the house, 20 years ago. But I didn't know at the time everything I know now, that's for sure. My grandfather would have kicked my behind if he had even seen me considering buying that house. He was a builder and a brick mason and a farmer and really one of the pioneers of permaculture. He would have told me I was an absolute idiot for even thinking about buying the property, but I've found places in the yard where I can get enough sunlight, and I've learned to work around things. But if you have a slope with a better sun orientation, I mean, heck, if you can get around the permits, or if you live in a place like maybe the Ozarks or something where permits aren't such a problem, I would definitely look into a Mike Oehler style house. That's let me see if I can remember how to spell his name. Oehler, I think. And the books are available on Permies.com. I think Paul Wheaton either bought the rights to them or partnered up with him before he died. And they've got a video. Paul went in and videoed the houses that Mike Oehler had built. And I think they're great. And then Paul actually came up with his own idea called a wafati. I cannot remember what it stands for. It's like an anagram. And he kind of built on that. And so if you're interested in an owner-built house, I think this is a place to start. I mean, otherwise, you can get into old woodcraft kind of thing I get into and take an axe and go out in the woods, or yes, a chainsaw if you have to. I hate chainsaws. I know most guys love their chainsaws. I don't like loud noises. That's why I don't use a lot of power tools. I put up with guns, but I don't have to put up with the noise of power tools and leaf blowers and all that. It's just me. I like living in the peaceful woods with peace and quiet where I can hear the creek and the birds singing and the wind rustling through the trees. I cannot stand the sound of a chainsaw. But if you're like me, maybe you get into building log cabins. It's actually not that hard. George Herder did a whole book on how to build log cabins. I think it was How to Get Out of the Rat Race and Live on $50 a Month. That kind of sounds familiar, doesn't it? There's several, and they're really good books The guy who wrote Botany in a Day. Cannot remember his name off the top of my head. A great book, one of my absolute favorite herb books, and a lot of his work's really good. Again, you can find his stuff on Permies. Um, yeah, I'm just blanking on his name. He wrote a whole book about how to build a log cabin. It's not that hard. I mean, again, your biggest problem these days is permits and taxes. But you can do a stack stone foundation, and you can just cut trees, and you need to learn to use an axe, and that's something. I'm very glad I've been using an axe most of my life. I cut firewood and everything. I'm getting more into green woodwork, and maybe I can do some videos on that sometime. Show you how to make furniture out of a tree. Show you how to make a log cabin even. I mean, it's not rocket science. And with the Foxfire books, they have a whole book on how to build a log cabin. You'd be amazed what you can do. I think most people, their experience with an axe is, well, they probably just maybe they got gifted an axe, I don't know, but they probably went to the store, went to the hardware store, bought an axe, and tried to split some wood. And probably got very frustrated and tired and sore very quickly, because when you buy an axe from the hardware store, it's not sharpened. Did you know you actually have to sharpen the axe? Yes, you do. And you should really get that axe sharp enough that it will cut like a knife. And you need to get what's called a bastard file. It's just a metal file that you use to sharpen it. If you don't have an old axe grinder, my grandfather actually had the wheel that turns, the big stone wheel, and I learned to sharpen on that when I was a very small child. It was stolen before we had to sell the farm. People were coming on the farm from, okay. So the largest pork producer in the world moved into the county very near our farm, and most of their workforce is illegal immigrants. And yeah, we had stuff walking off the property every night. Every single night, people were coming on the property, stealing everything that was not nailed down. I had to walk around with I had to carry a gun at all times. It got so dangerous that, and the police wouldn't do a thing about it. Well, I mean, obviously they're not going to do anything to upset the employees of the biggest employer in the county. So, I won't get into that. But thanks to the county and the state of North Carolina, we had to sell the farm, and where my family had been since the 1600s, no one lives there anymore because the stench of the pork farms and plant, the contamination of the water, and the crime. Everybody basically that doesn't work for Smithfield or work for the county, plenty of county jobs, right? You can be a teacher, or you can be a janitor at the community college, whatever. I mean, basically everybody that doesn't work for the pork plant or the county, or maybe, a small town in that county, has left. And everybody else is pretty much on welfare and drugs. And they're just, I mean, while I was down there trying to take care of the family farm, I was run off the road twice, just at random, just crazy people high, on meth and who knows what else, just ran me off the road into a ditch, almost killed me a couple of times. Like I said, I was carrying a gun all the time. And people would come onto the farm with four-wheelers and destroy our crops. I mean, just letting their kids run wild. People would shoot at the horses and other livestock. Set fires. It was horrible, and it wasn't. And by no means was it all should I blame it all on the illegal immigrants? They actually came there to work for a living, and most of them were pretty decent folks, believe it or not. They took a lot better care of their kids than the locals did, who would just let their kids turn into wild animals, running around in gangs and using drugs, and it was bad. Anyway. Eastern North Carolina is a hellhole. I'm sorry, it is. I'm going to say everything between Charlotte, well, maybe Raleigh, and the coast is just an absolute hellhole. And I hate to say that because it's where my family was since the 1600s, and I absolutely love it. But, I love the coastal swamps. I grew up partially in the coastal swamps. Absolute hellhole. But anyway, maybe I will do some videos, some green woodworking, show you how to use axes and knives and ads. And I have a couple of ads that are really cool. I inherited from my grandfather. Fro. You can actually split your own boards with a fro. It's an F-R-O-E, not like an afro. It's actually like a long blade on a pole. Really cool stuff. Maybe I will show you how to do some of that stuff sometime. But anyway, I have wandered so far afield. Let's get back to our recipe of the week. It's still chili. And when it's chili, I like to make chili. Now, I am not a chili purist. I'm not one of those, Texans that gets all angry if you put beans in your chili. I happen to like beans. I don't necessarily like, is it Cincinnati chili where they put cinnamon in it? That's freaky. That's not my thing, honestly. But I make a really good chili. And it's a red meat chili. You can certainly use beef, but you could use deer, if you had some elk or bison. Oh, bison is so good. Moose is, I've never actually tried moose, but people rave about it. I wish we had moose where I live. We used to have a ton of elk, by the way. There are towns all around me named after elk, like Banner Elk, North Carolina. There used to be a bunch of elk up there. They've kind of tried to reintroduce small herds. You can get permits, like a lottery, to hunt every now and then, until the populations get big enough to where I don't have to jump through a bunch of government hoops and pay off a bunch of people to get the opportunity, the privilege of hunting in the land of the free and the home of the brave. Our ancestors actually came here to have access to land to hunt, and mainly to make whiskey without paying taxes on it. And, barely had they fought. I mean, it was the Scots-Irish who won the American Revolution. I mean, seriously, the very people that came here to make whiskey, who did not care about tea taxes, were the Over Mountain Men and the Southern Army. And, were it not for my ancestors, George Washington would not have been the first president, and barely had the war ended before he marched on them in what they was called the Whiskey Rebellion, because they actually took it seriously when our founders said we wanted to have a free country without a bunch of taxes and regulations. How foolish was that, right? Otherwise, I think George Washington was a pretty decent guy. Maybe had he been a little more honest with Benedict Arnold would not have become a traitor. I can definitely see where he could have interpreted that Washington betrayed his friendship. You don't want to have sympathy for a traitor, but I can definitely see why he may have been angry at Washington. Washington was a great general, a great president, but not a very good friend. I think most historians would probably agree with that. But no sooner had my ancestors fought that war and won their freedom when he turned the army on them. And, well, we've been paying taxes ever since, haven't we? But anyway, back to chili. My word, I'm all over the map today. Can you tell I got a really good night's sleep last night? Yeah. When I get a really good night's sleep, I have so much mental energy. This is why I write so many books. My mind and I'm not even hyperactive or ADD. I just have like this really intense, active, creative mind. And a lot of times it keeps me awake at night. That's why I don't sleep very well, because I can't turn my brain off. When I do sleep, the next day I have mental energy. I can write articles. I can write books. I can play half a dozen instruments. I can I draw and study Latin. I've started learning calligraphy and various, all these little hobbies, just to keep my mind occupied, because it's going, all the time. So back to chili. This is a red meat chili. Now, my great uncle made a fantastic pork and tomatillo green chili. Maybe I'll talk about that next week. I'll give you his recipe. It was competition level. Mine, I've never entered in a competition, but several people who are competitors have tried it, and they say it's competition level. But it's also super simple. Really the secret, as far as I'm concerned, to good chili is to kind of stage your ingredients, make sure everything gets good and browned. Don't put everything in at once, in other words, and don't use a lot of water, because water doesn't have a lot of flavor. So literally, I'm going to use anything from chunks of meat to ground beef. I'm going to get a good cast iron, usually a Dutch oven, but any good pot that has a good heavy bottom that you like to use. I put a little bit of oil in there, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cook my onions. I'm going to start cooking down those onions and any fresh peppers. I usually use at least one poblano because I like the flavor of poblano. Um, Probably a couple jalapenos, some serranos, sometimes some habaneros. I do like habaneros quite a bit. If I don't have habaneros, I will use a little habanero sauce at the end. I like the El Yucateca brand. It's not a vinegar-based sauce, so you get the full flavor of the sweetness of the habanero without the vinegar, which I don't really like vinegar-based hot sauces in my chili. I just don't like that combination. But anyway, I'm going to get my onions and I'm going to get my peppers going in there. After the onions are translucent, I'm going to add some chopped garlic, crushed garlic. I just crush it with the heel of my hand and then chop it up fine. I use a lot of onion and garlic. Then I am going to toast my spices, whatever spices I might be using at the time. I could just be, commercial chili powder and black pepper, but I usually will try to put some cumin in there. Cumin is really the base of chili powder. It's the main flavor of chili, so cumin is absolutely essential. Um, Paprika is the other half, essentially, of chili powder. So I'm going to get some paprika in there. And like I said, you can literally use just a cheap commercial brand of chili powder. Just basically use half the bottle. I mean, because it doesn't have a lot of flavor to it. The spices are stale. Oregano, I think a pinch of oregano is really good in there. And yeah, probably a little cilantro, but I would add that later because I'm really looking at more toasting the spices as opposed to adding herbs at this point. Then I am going to brown up my meat really well. And I may brown the meat first and just cook my vegetables in the meat grease. That's probably what I would do most times. But it's up to you. You can either put some oil in the pot and cook down your vegetables, or you can brown your meat first, push the meat to the side if you have a big pot, or take it out, and then cook the vegetables in the beef fat. The reason I'm giving you two options is because if you're using deer meat or something, it's going to be pretty lean. Bear meat actually makes a good chili, and it has a goodly amount of fat to it. But for beef, I would probably do the meat first and use the grease. But you got two options. Then I am going to put some tomatoes in there. And I'm going to cook the tomatoes, right in there with the vegetables, and I'm going to let them brown a little bit. I would usually take like a little tomato sauce or paste, and I will actually brown it in the oil before I add the whole can of tomatoes or jar of tomatoes or fresh tomatoes from the garden. That's one of the reasons I do buy tomato paste. I mean, I think it's really good to have some tomato paste on hand because fresh tomatoes from the garden, just crushed, they're not really going to brown very well. I mean, there's just a lot of water in them, and you're going to get some good caramelized flavors, if you use that. Now, I'm going to add some dried peppers, pasilla peppers, guajillos, I mean, whatever I got. I'm going to go to the Mexican aisle in the grocery store, and I'm going to buy, 3 or 4 bags of dried peppers. They're very inexpensive. This is something I like to have on hand all the time. Or the other thing I do is I make my own dried peppers. And from any of the hot peppers I grow in the garden, or a poblano, poblanos are usually, sort of like a bell pepper, but every now and then you get one that's really hot. I love poblanos, but it's sort of like Russian roulette with peppers. I grow a lot of hot peppers. The trick with drying hot peppers, most of them, you can actually just tie the stem with a string and hang them up and just let them dry. I mean, that's the way you can do a lot of these. Jalapenos have a tendency to mold or rot. So I do this always with jalapenos, but I do it with a lot of hot peppers. I like to smoke them. I smoke them when I'm making barbecue. I'm cooking my pork or whatever over hickory coals and oak, and it's got just this incredible aroma of fragrant smoke. I smoke my jalapenos and several other peppers right there alongside the meat. That cooks them. It turns them red usually, and they start to dry out a little bit. And then I hang them and let them dry, and it just makes a huge difference. It keeps your jalapenos from molding or rotting, and it gives you this incredible smoked flavor in your chili. So yeah, I'll probably use a few dried peppers from the store, but if I've got some of my good smoked peppers, those are going in there right now. Okay, that's going in there with the tomatoes. Then I'm going to add three types of beans because I like dark red kidneys, I like black beans, and I like pinto beans. They all have a different flavor. They complement each other wonderfully. Some are a little more savory, some are a little more sweet. The pintos sort of have a creaminess to them. So I like three beans in my chili. If you don't like beans in your chili, leave them out, but you're missing out big time. I mean, seriously. I'm sorry, Texas. Beans and chili is just darn good. And, that's basically it. Now, I'm going to give you one tip. If you can find a canned sauce called El Pato, Pato. It's a yellow can. It's got a little duck on it. It's actually one of the oldest, if not the oldest, sauces commercially produced in the United States. Little family business started out in California sometime, I think, in maybe the 1920s. I mean, it's really that old. It's an excellent thin tomato-based sauce. Got a lot of cilantro in there, good and spicy hot pepper, a lot of cumin. Um, that is sort of like my secret ingredient. When I put that in chili, people just go crazy over it. I mean, it's just this little can. You can get it for like $1.50 maximum at most stores used to carry it. I used to always get it at Food Line. I know they quit carrying it. Um, Piggly Wiggly actually still carried it last time. I know these are southern stores. Not everybody's going to have them, but you can find it online. Okay, you can order this stuff by the case. You can order a couple cans. El Pato, Pato, absolutely delicious. And when I put this in chili, I'm telling you, competition guys go nuts over it. They're like, "What is in your chili? It's so good." Well, all I do is like back up a few minutes before I ever add the tomatoes. I told you I could put some tomato paste in there and let it brown. I just add a can of that El Pato sauce and let it thoroughly cook and season the beef. Now, you can also use the same sauce to season your beef to make excellent taco meat. It's just like a magical little can of sauce. And you can't find it in tiendas and stuff. Mexican folks don't even know about this. This is like a legitimate, Mexican American family legacy, and I think it's really, really good. So anyway, I just simmer all this down. You notice I never added any water to the pot. Might add, half a dark beer if I didn't have the tomatoes that I browned real well, just to give it a dark flavor. Probably not. This is just a real simple dish. I cook it down nice and thick. I do not like my beef really to boil. I'm just kind of simmer this down because it ruins the texture. I mean, honestly, I just simmer this down, and when it's time to serve it up, put it in a bowl, put some sour cream on top of it, grab that El Yucateca habanero sauce. I like the green one, the verde. Put some of that stuff on there. Be careful if you're not used to habaneros. It will light you up. That is really hot stuff. But that's it. I mean, it's really that simple. Maybe a little grated cheddar cheese across the top. Grab a few tortilla chips. Really one of my favorite meals. So easy to make. I have the ingredients on hand almost all the time. I probably make a pot of chili a month, and I make enough that I eat on it for like a week. Okay, so I eat chili like breakfast, lunch, and dinner for a week until it's finished off. I love it. And like I said, you can use various meats. You can substitute ingredients. You can add whatever you want and tailor it to your own taste. Again, it's more of a technique than a recipe. So take it and run with it. Enjoy it. Do your own thing. And, next week, if I remember, I will tell you all about my recently departed great uncle's chili verde recipe. My word, was he a character. I probably take after him a lot, actually. He kind of had the overactive mind as well, but he was kind of like, if you remember Duck Dynasty, you remember Uncle Si, and you remember Phil. Well, he would have been a combination of Si and Phil, kind of grumpy and crazy, and Vietnam veteran, pilot. He had his own little airplane. I'll get into that story maybe next week. A couple of interesting anecdotes about. Basically, he taught me to fly when I was about 10 years old. He took me up in the plane and turned the controls over to me and wouldn't touch them again until we were on the ground. He would have crashed that plane had I not learned to fly. So I am not kidding. He was not going to touch those controls, and he would have done it too. He would have killed us both had I not, pulled it together, manned up, listened to his instruction, and learned to fly that plane. He was one of those like crazy old cowboys. So we'll get into that a little bit next week. But first of all, let's talk about licorice. And licorice is such a fascinating herb. Okay, the sweet component is glycorrhizin, and it is actually sweeter than sugar. It is amazingly also strongly antiviral. It's been shown to help with hepatitis and liver cancer. University of California, Davis, I think the researcher was Mark Zern, did all these studies about how licorice would help with liver cancer and hepatitis. So this is one of those really great herbs that could actually be like a lifesaver if you can use it. Licorice actually stops liver damage. You can use it along with milk thistle, which also is restorative to liver. It prevents damage and it helps with the cell regeneration. But licorice specifically has been shown, this again, UC Davis, they used the glycorrhizin as an isolated compound to show that it repaired and improved liver enzymes. So, I mean, that's a big deal. Liver failure is nothing to joke about. It's a really horrible way to die, actually. And there are at least 2 herbs. There are probably several others. I mean, most of your bitter herbs are very good for liver health. But specifically, milk thistle and licorice have been shown to help repair the tissue of the liver. That's incredible, actually. But the thing about it is some of those other bitter herbs you don't want to combine with licorice. Actually, like berberine that we would normally use is like the go-to liver herb, liver stimulating herb. Licorice counteracts it. Berberine is Oregon graperoot, barberry, golden seal, coptis. Licorice and berberine seem to kind of cancel each other out. So you cannot combine those 2 herbs and get any benefit for the liver out of them. You can, however, combine licorice with, say, dandelion root, burdock root. It's actually, they have a cooling nature, whereas the berberine, the Oregon grape or whatever, has a stimulating nature. So you have to bear that in mind. I have made a really delicious batch of bitters, and the recipe, I think it's still up on my blog. If not, just email me. I'll try to get it for you if you need it. I think I discussed this one in the course I did for the Grow Network as well, but I call it cooling bitters. I combined licorice with dandelion and burdock and mint, and it was just delicious. They're delicious digestive bitters and made it a nice kind of alternative, a break from, gentian and Oregon grape and orange peel and more spicy, stimulating bitters. Both help with digestion, and I found the licorice bitters were really nice. The licorice gave it a nice sweetness to counter the slight bitterness of the dandelion and burdock and such as that. And it was seemed to help us sleep as well. It just kind of seemed to calm the system down before bed, and very antiviral as well. And really, one of the other aspects of licorice, I told you it strengthens the kidneys. And I noticed the reason I actually put this formula together, it was a few years ago. I noticed when I started standing up, I would get dizzy. Just not every time, but I would stand up and get a little bit dizzy. And, I'm pretty tall, 6'4", so it kind of goes with the territory. Basically, your kidneys keep your blood pressure stable by stabilizing the water in the kidneys. And especially if you're tall or if you have weak kidneys, when you stand up, your kidneys take a little bit of time to adjust, and you have low blood pressure. I think it's called syncope. If you have weak kidneys, you will probably feel really down and sick and kind of weak and tired when the weather changes, like when a storm's coming in. You will probably get dizzy if you go up in elevation. Again, it's your kidneys balancing the water. What licorice does is it tonifies and strengthens the kidneys. So when I started experiencing that, kind of drop in blood pressure every now and then standing up, I put together this bitters formula, and within a few days, my kidneys were, strong, and I wasn't feeling dizzy. And I actually, I felt a lot stronger. I don't know what was going on, but that seemed to work as a tonic for me. I had more energy and didn't get as chilled as easily. And the kidneys are an amazing organ. And again, you just like you want to protect your liver, you want to protect your kidneys. Now, I mentioned this though because licorice, as it strengthens kidneys, can cause the kidneys to retain fluid. As you know, if you have high blood pressure, probably the first thing a doctor is going to do is give you a diuretic to pull the fluid out of the body to lower your blood pressure. Because licorice strengthens the kidneys, it can cause high blood pressure. That is especially true, according to Michael Moore, the herbalist, in what he called anabolic people. This is big, thick, red-faced, your classic football player, retired cop, or as he put it, loud woman that's retired and is the big mouth that tries to run everything in every club. It's a certain body type. If you're tall and slender, if you're short and slender, actually, you can of course be fat without being the anabolic type. These are like really aggressive, red-faced type people. So that was what he said. Don't be offended. Take it with a grain of salt. But I do have to warn you that licorice can cause high blood pressure. So if you have a problem with your blood pressure, you probably don't want to use licorice. The other thing is licorice should never be used in high doses or for long periods of time. It's actually not just a candy. It's actually a very powerful herb that if overused can cause some serious health problems. But used as needed, moderate doses, moderate amounts of time, it's fantastic. It was one of Stephen Buhner's favorite antiviral herbs. In fact, most of his antiviral formulas, he included licorice to enhance the antiviral properties of these other herbs. Licorice is definitely one you want to have around for cold and flu season. COVID, been used a lot by people with HIV, AIDS. It's an excellent antiviral herb. And what it really seems to do, though, is enhance the antiviral properties of like the wormwoods or isatis or hatunia or any of these antiviral herbs. It makes them even more powerful. And so great to have in the garden. I mean, I absolutely think we should be growing, licorice should be in every herbalist garden. If nothing else, it makes a great cough drop, okay? It's really lung supportive, and that's one of the reasons I use it, because, I have asthma, and licorice is just a really good herb, and it's one because of my constitution, being tall, and, I wouldn't call myself slender. I'm actually fairly, muscular. I mean, I'm like, 210 pounds at 6'4", but I don't carry fat. I mean, I won't say I have a six-pack, but I definitely have some definition on my abdominals, because I cut wood and stuff. It's not like, intentional. I got nobody impressed, trust me. I'm a single guy who lives in the middle of the woods, but I work with my hands, and I stay fairly fit. Really, though, what was another interesting aside is most of the candy that you think is licorice, and maybe you don't like licorice candy, it's not flavored with licorice at all, and it's actually flavored with anise. You may not even know what licorice really tastes like. Anise is, it's a spice, and it's a lot cheaper and easier to store and use than licorice, unless you're getting the, was it Sweden or Norway? They do real licorice, and it's actually salted. It's actually salty licorice. It's a really acquired taste. Now they make a sweet version too, and they make a sweet version that's coated in salt. That's awesome, by the way. I love the stuff. I mean, I when I can find the actual imported real licorice candies, they actually color them with charcoal. It has a bitter sweetness, and like I said, it's often salty, and it's a bizarre flavor. But if you ever try it, and you like it, you're going to love it. Seriously. Now, I like anise as well, but to me, licorice and anise are two different flavors. For that matter, fennel seed has a similar flavor to anise. So does caraway, so does angelica, and all of these have been used as digestive herbs. They're used to flavor anisette, Pernod, pastis, sambuca, Jägermeister, even Jägermeister. Oh, there's a fascinating story about Jägermeister, by the way. I'll get into that another day. But there's actually a saint that's the patron saint of hunting, of deer hunting, and the Jägermeister has his emblem on it. There's a really neat monastic medicine history about that beverage. We'll get into another day. But ouzo's often flavored with anise. Uh, and it's also an absinthe. It just kind of helps sweeten up the wormwood-based absinthe. But I love ouzo. Actually, I mean, I like Greek food, but if I'm at a bar or something, and I just want one drink, well, I'm a total cheapskate. I'm not going to pay. I'm not going to pay $10 and $15 for a drink when I can buy the same bottle of bourbon for that price. But if there's one drink I'm going to get at a bar, it's actually probably going to be an ouzo. I mean, I just have one ouzo, and it's very satisfying, and it's got a great flavor. And anyway, that's my little treat every now and then. Anisette's also really good. Anisette is very, very nice after a meal. But anyway, you may not have ever actually tasted licorice. And if you think you hate it and don't want to use licorice medicinally because you hate the taste of licorice candy, just remember, you probably were eating anise-flavored candy. And anise we'll cover under a whole other topic. While the flavors are similar, they are different. And but both are useful medicinal herbs. But really, to focus in on licorice right now, and honestly, after saying that, I'm absolutely craving some of that salty licorice candy. I mean, that stuff is so good. Anyway, you remember blackjack gum? Blackjack gum was another one of those things that was flavored with licorice, or probably anise actually. And there's even Irish milk, I think is the way you pronounce it. It's a Dutch milk, like we would have hot chocolate. They have a sweetened milk flavored with anise, considered to be a really good sleep aid, and I think that's delicious as well. But I was a blackjack gum fan. I mean, I don't even think they make that stuff anymore, but it's fantastic. But again, not everybody likes licorice. Some people really hate it. An ex-girlfriend of mine thought it was like the most disgusting thing on the face of the earth. I don't know why. She just never learned to eat licorice. You have to learn to develop a taste for things as a child. The great George Leonard Herder, his favorite flavors were licorice and anise. Just about every recipe in the Bull Cook that says this has a special flavor, an interesting flavor, or this is a really unique dish, he put a little anise in it, or a little licorice extract. He was just a nut about licorice, just about the same way I am. And the only reason is we were introduced to it as kids. If your parents or your grandparents didn't introduce you to certain flavors when you were a child, your brain never developed that pathway. That's what happens. Every time we taste something new, there's actually sort of like a new groove that grows in the brain, and the taste buds associate with it. And that's why really the more varieties of foods and flavors you eat, the smarter you tend to be, because literally those taste buds are all connected to these pathways in the brain. And if you've just grown up drinking Coca-Cola, eating chicken nuggets, you're not going to do as well in school, probably. I mean, not always. I mean, some people are born with a higher intellect. Others, most of us, that intellect is developed. And developing that taste memory and those pathways connected to those specific taste buds is absolutely as important as learning to read or write or play a musical instrument or do science. I mean, you or learn a language. I mean, if you don't develop your child's palate, if you allow them to be a little dinner Nazi and they say, no, I only want pizza and I'm only going to, or pizza rolls or something, no, don't do that. You have to introduce children to all these different flavors, or you're doing them a horrible disservice. It's probably, they're just going to gravitate, because kids gravitate towards sweet, they gravitate towards sugar. It's going to lead to diabetes and kidney failure and heart disease, but you're also causing them to miss out on intellectual development and that maturity that comes from the maturity of taste, to be able to enjoy all these incredible foods and flavors. If you never encourage them to mature out of that, 3-year-old tyrant phase, they're going to miss out on some of the most wonderful things in life. Seriously. I mean, I think was it Brillat Savarin? I cannot say the man's name all of a sudden. He said, when all the other pleasures of life have faded, we still have the pleasure of the table. Okay? When you get to the point where you're getting up in years and you can't go out and take a walk, and you probably lost interest in sex, and maybe your vision is fading and your hearing is fading, you're not hearing music. If you can keep your sense of smell acute, and you can keep your sense of taste acute, you can still enjoy food. I mean, that's really, when you stop enjoying food, you stop eating as much, you start losing weight, you get sicker, you get weaker. I'm just telling you, if y'all have kids, put food in front of them. And I know, again, I'm not a parent, and I know some autistic kids really have issues with certain food textures. But assuming you have a regular, kid, just make food and serve it to them. Don't ask them what they want to eat. Never ask a child what they want to eat. Put the same food you eat, in front of them. That's what my mother and my grandmother and everybody did to me. That's what, Jacques Pepin, one of his shows, he's with his daughter. She said how much she loves Brussels sprouts and bacon, that combination. And he said, why do you love Brussels sprouts and bacon? She said, because you fed them to me as a child. And he said, does your daughter love Brussels sprouts and bacon? She said, yes. He said, why? Because I fed them to her as a child. He said, the way I raised you? I gave you to eat, I and your mother ate, and there was no other alternative. If you didn't eat it, you went to bed hungry. You learned to eat like an adult when you were a child. It really is that simple. I mean, fast food has ruined this nation. And, processed cheese and chicken nuggets and tons of corn syrup. It's not only ruining our health, it's ruining our culture. It's ruining our intellects. I mean, that diet also does lead to dementia and Alzheimer's. I guess enough said on that. But, some of these herbs, and especially with some of these herbs like licorice and horehound and some of the more bitter herbs, if you can teach your kids at a young age to use and appreciate these herbs, it's going to pay off in dividends of health like you can't believe later on down the road. You're not doing your kid any favors by feeding him on, McDonald's every day. But anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. I'll leave that one for Sally Fallon and the Weston A. Price Foundation, which, folks, I absolutely love. And I'm still so honored that Sally recommends my work. She's such a brilliant, brilliant person and best-selling author. And, one of the greatest honors of my life. Believe it or not, speaking of people recommending my stuff, Dr. Robert Malone recommended my Substack. Yeah, I got this wave of subscribers, and I didn't know where they were coming from. Dr. Robert Malone. So, wow, huh? Yeah, I mean, this hillbilly from North Carolina is starting to get out there a little bit. I wish it would translate into more book sales. I gotta admit that, but it's still, it really is an honor. Anyway, licorice was well known in ancient Greek medicine. Dioscorides mentioned it as glycyrrhiza, which is still basically the root of the scientific name, certainly the Latin name, of licorice, but all those extracts and compounds like glycyrrhizine and such, that's all comes from licorice, which comes from the ancient Greek tradition. He recommended using the roots or the pressed juice from the roots. He said that juice was good for sharpness of the arteries. I'm not exactly sure what that means. But he recommended it being placed under the tongue and letting it melt. So like actual sublingual. They were actually using sublingual medicine in ancient Greece. That's really pretty impressive. I think that would surprise a lot of doctors these days. He said it was good for the burning of the stomach, disorders of the chest and liver, parasitic skin disorders, bladder and kidney disorders. Taken with a drink of raisin wine and melted in the mouth, it quenches the thirst. Rubbed on topically, it heals wounds, and chewed, it is good for the stomach. A decoction of new roots is good for the same things. The root, dried and pounded into small pieces, is fit for sprinkling on the membrane of the eye. It is also called, well, I don't need to get into all the different names of it, but this, licorice has been part of official medicine for, I don't know, 5,000 years. It's been used all over the world. St. Hildegard von Bingen said, no matter how it is eaten, it gives a person a clear voice. It makes one's mind agreeable and his eyes clear. It soothes the stomach for digestion. It is of great benefit for insane persons. If eaten frequently, it clears the furor from his head. Again, I cannot explain, how or why that works, but St. Hildegard von Bingen is probably the greatest herbalist that ever lived. Definitely be worth a try, wouldn't it? If the person doesn't have an issue with blood pressure, who knows what licorice might help with certain mental disorders. I don't know. That's not my field of expertise. And honestly, there is no book to my knowledge about that. Stephen Herod Buhner wrote about using certain, psychedelic plants, psychoactive. We're talking psilocybin mushrooms and various things. Microdosing for depression. That's hugely controversial. I'm not going to get into that. I don't recommend any illegal plants on my show. And I try to warn you about all the dangerous ones. But as far as I know, there is no book written on using herbs really for psychosis, schizophrenia, you name it. I mean, a lot of the medications that are used are incredibly harmful, incredibly toxic. And if we could do a little more research on herbal medicine for, serious chemical imbalances in the brain, that could be revolutionary. So I'm just going to put that out there. If anyone wants to, it's not something I'm going to write about. It's not my area of expertise. Yes, my mother is a retired psychologist, but she believed in counseling as opposed to medication. I avoid doctors at all costs, and I have no background in mental health in any case. But if you're listening to the show and you do, or you know someone who does, I would definitely, go back to my last couple of shows. Listen about lemon balm and borage and such, and how it was used to treat depression. Go back to my show on mugwort. Mugwort seems to have a way of helping people get over what kind of refocuses the mind, helps people not be as upset by trauma or grief. We could be talking, someone who's gone through serious traumatic physically or mental situation, or someone who's lost a loved one. Mugwort has been found traditionally to help that person deal with the issue. Ashwagandha helps people deal with mental stress. I'm thinking of several herbs, really just off the top of my head. Pasque-flower anemone, which is somewhat toxic and should be used with great care, seems to help with PTSD and what they call fugue states, when everything just kind of like spinning out of control. That seems to help with shock. Lobelia has been shown also to help with shock, and so there are several herbs. I think if you're an herbalist and you're also into, or maybe you suffer from some mental health issues, definitely be worth researching. And if you end up getting a book out of this, I'll buy it. Seriously, I would be very interested in seeing what you come up with. And of course, there's so many herbs that help with sort of PMS and various emotional issues associated, with women's reproductive health and menopause and such as that. So yeah, certainly not outside of the realm of possibility. And yeah, you write that book and you do the solid research and show the documentation, I'll have you on my show as a guest anytime, and I'll help you promote the book. no problem. I mean, I would think that would be very cool. And I do know there is some research that has been done on this. Look into it. You're probably going to find a lot, but I would warn maybe kind of stay away from some of the psychoactive, the hallucinogenic, I guess we could say, herbs, because whereas some people might be able to use them very responsibly and it might be useful in certain cases, you got to remember there are going to be kids reading your book. And, just last night, I kind of went on a tangent of listening to some weird old music. A couple of guys who did some great music that I enjoy. Rocky Erikson with the 13th Floor Elevators. He was, it's like one of the classic garage bands. Guy was completely schizophrenic, probably drug induced. SKip Spence is one of the greatest musicians of all time, in my opinion. He was a founding member of the Jefferson Airplane, the Quicksilver Messenger Service, and Moby Grape, which was actually one of the best rock bands nobody's ever heard of. LSD and other drug-induced schizophrenia, paranoid schizophrenic. These guys were basically completely psychotic, and when really did some of their best music. But he never recovered. Skip never recovered. He just degenerated over the years. So this is sort of the fine line we walk. When we recommend a plant, I could recommend a plant that is toxic and poisonous. And I'm not going to do that, I could say, well, you might want to look into this plant, but I'm going to warn you that it's toxic. I'm not going to tell that to a 15-year-old kid. I'm not going to tell that kid about that plant at all, except that it's poisonous. When they get older and they can be responsible, then I might tell them about it. I honestly believe we're going to be held accountable for everything we say and do and write, especially. And I've told you before about books written by certain herbalists that I think were very irresponsible and have given very bad advice. So if this is something you're going to look into, I'm just going to ask you to be very careful and remember that kids could read your book. And you don't want to be responsible for someone losing their mind. So anyway, back to more pleasant topics. Brother Aloysius, who was Father Nape's protege, said that licorice was good to dissolve phlegm, was good for fevers, treatment of chronic conditions of the respiratory organs, and also used for lung complaints, chills, coughs, hoarseness, not horses, well, maybe horses too, but definitely hoarseness, mucus in the lungs, consumption, that's tuberculosis, measles, dry coughs, painful or difficult urination, stones and gravel, it's kidney stones, bladder stones, etc., gallstones, and rheumatism. In Russia, it has a long tradition. Igor Zelovich Zevin, in his very good Russian herbal, said that it was one of the most widely grown herbs in Russia and had been used since at least 5000 BC. So, yeah. He said that in the Chinese tradition, licorice was almost as important as ginseng, but in Russia, it was highly valued for its use in candies. And apparently the Russians have quite a taste for licorices as well as the Swedish, but in Russia, these candies especially were used for treating bladder and kidney ailments, gestational toxicosis, that involves excessive vomiting at the beginning of pregnancy and also includes dropsy and edema at the end of pregnancy. Now, I'd be a little careful, be very careful. I don't want to recommend licorice for pregnant women. You got to remember that blood pressure is a super, super dangerous issue in pregnancy. So I'm just going to give that one, with a grain of salt. That's how it was used traditionally in Russia. I'm not recommending it be used that way. If you want to look into herbs to help with, morning sickness and such, I think that really consult with somebody who knows what they're doing. They're probably safe way to use licorice, but they may be safe for herbs as well. Always consult an expert. I don't recommend herbs during pregnancy because it's just too dangerous. Now, there are some very useful herbs during pregnancy, but those are in books written by other people, not by me. Okay. He also said that in Russia, licorice was used to treat burns, eczema, lupus, hives, Yeah, licorice is a very good herb for hives if you can use it. An infusion used to treat chronic constipation, useful in the early stages of diabetes and insignificant hypertonia. The ability of licorice root to neutralize poisons has been known in Russia since ancient times. It can neutralize the effects of poisons, food poisons, viruses, bacteria, and other toxins. Russian herbalists recommend giving licorice root tea in milk to children suffering from whooping cough and thrush. Gerard said, 1500s England, the root of licorice is good against rush harshness in the throat and breasts. He's talking everything from hoarseness to coughing and such. It openeth the pipes of the lungs, if they be stuffed or stopped, and ripeneth the cough, and bringeth forth the phlegm. In other words, it makes the cough more productive. It's good expectorant. He recommended combine the juice of licorice with ginger and other spices made into little cakes like gingerbread to be used for coughs, or made into a lozenge and put under the tongue. Infirmities of the lungs and breast, and yeah, he especially recommends sort of a cough drop, a lozenge for that. Good for against the heat of the stomach and the mouth. I guess we're talking heartburn. And using it for infirmities of the liver, chest, scabs, sores of the bladder, and diseases of the kidneys. Again, he says good for hoarseness, difficulty breathing, inflammation of the lungs, pleurisy, spitting of blood, consumption, rottenness of the lungs, all infirmities, and ruggedness of the chest. Takes away inflammations, good for the kidneys and bladder, especially if they're ulcerated. Good for dry cough, all infirmities of the chest. Combined with honey, it would healeth ulcers, which means essentially skin sores that wouldn't heal. Culpepper, like to combine it with maidenhair fern and figs, which is very interesting, to basically make a cough syrup. Very good for dry cough and hoarseness, wheezing, shortness of the breath, all griefs of the breast and lungs, consumption, that's tuberculosis, all pains of the reins, he's talking kidneys, urinary issues, strangury, heat of the urine, strangury, I can't pronounce that word. The powder, again, good for pains in the eyes. Oh, and he recommended combining it with rose water to make cough drops and such. In Ireland, John Kehoe says that it was used for coughs, obstructions of the lungs, to provoke the urine, and to break up stones, good for the liver and disorders of the mouth. And Miss Grieve gets into all the history, but I'm already running long on here. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you she said it was really good for asthma, dry coughs, all pectoral diseases, or disorders of the chest. She mentions that Parkinson grew licorice. Parkinson was the king's herbalist, and he was King Henry VIII's herbalist. He was the greatest herbalist and botanist of England, and it was one of his favorite herbs, medicinal herbs. Particularly good for coughs, consumption, chest complaints in general, notably bronchitis, is an ingredient in almost all cough medicine for its valuable soothing properties. In more modern use, Plants for a Future says licorice is one of the most commonly used herbs in Western herbal medicine, has a long history of use, both as a medicine and as a flavoring to disguise unpleasant flavors in other medications. It is a very sweet, moist, soothing herb that detoxifies and protects the liver. It is also powerfully anti-inflammatory, being used in conditions as varied as arthritis and mouth ulcers. The root is alterative, antispasmodic, demulcent, diuretic, emollient, expectorant, laxative, moderately pectoral, and tonic. And you remember I told you kind of about the tonic effect when I started taking it to get my blood pressure up. I just felt better all over. I felt stronger and had more energy. The root has also been shown to have a hormonal effect similar to the ovarian hormone. Licorice root is much used in cough medicines and also used in the treatment of catarrhal infections. It's, catarrhal means congestion, essentially. So we're talking congested infections of the lungs, urinary tract, etc. It is taken internally in the treatment of Addison's disease, asthma, bronchitis, coughs, peptic ulcers, arthritis, allergic complaints, and following steroidal therapy. It should be used in moderation and should not be prescribed for pregnant women. See, they agree with me. I'd be a little careful about that. Or people with high blood pressure, kidney disease, or taking digoxin-based medication. Prolonged usage raises the blood pressure and causes water retention. Externally, the root is used in treatment of herpes, eczema, and shingles. Known hazards of Glycyrrhiza glabra, that's licorice. A gross overdose, which means a lot, of the root can cause edema, high blood pressure, and congestive heart failure. So again, never use large amounts of licorice and don't use it long term at all. With those warnings in mind, I think that pretty much sums up licorice. You can see it's such an incredibly useful herb. We absolutely do not have time to get into a licorice candy or cough drop recipe right now. Maybe I can get that for next week's show. I'll try to revisit that. But, obviously this is an herb you need to be growing and you need to have it on hand. I think it's just especially good for coughs and bronchial congestion, but also for its antiviral and other properties. It's a really good herb. And like I said, introduce your kids to licorice candy early on, help them learn to love it, and they won't have that extreme aversion. I mean, when I tell you my ex-girlfriend hated licorice, the smell of it made her nauseous. I could not use licorice either in candy or as an herbal medicine. And that goes as well for anise, which is in so many recipes, and fennel seed. And I think I did slip some caraway seed into some potato soup one time, and she didn't mind. But, I mean, she had such extreme hatred of licorice simply because she was never introduced to it as a kid. And by the time she had gotten into her teens and tried a piece of licorice candy, whatever pathways in the brain had not developed, and she hated it. And what if it had been an emergency situation where she needed it as a useful herb? I mean, low blood pressure, passing out, fainting, or maybe a bad bronchial infection, or etc. So get those kids used to eating odd things early on. I've mentioned before, my favorite snack when I was 5 years old was pickled mushroom caps. Why? Because my mother got me eating pickled mushroom caps. I mean, when I was a baby, before I was even supposed to be eating solid food, my grandmother was feeding me collard greens with apple cider vinegar on them. She was teaching me, even though it was, I was having digestive issues, certainly as a small child would, before they're supposed to eat solid food, she was teaching me to love bitter greens and sour vinegar at a very young age. And I'm actually quite grateful for that because, there are very few things I don't like to eat. I don't have any aversions to any real food. Just earlier I was frying up some chicken livers and onions and topping them with hot sauce and dark mushroom soy sauce. And, those are flavors that most folks might find a little odd. And let me tell you, one of the most delicious and best smelling meals I've ever had. Chicken livers just fried up with onions, topped with dark mushroom soy sauce. That is a game changer. Be sure to try some dark mushroom soy sauce. Delicious. And just some hot sauce. And, really good. And, of course, my dog went crazy for it, too. He had to eat a bunch of chicken livers. So, anyway, y'all have a wonderful week, and I will talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.